start recording here. Okay. All right. So we'll pause for a second and then we'll jump right in. Well, I am so excited to have Uli Sommers on today as my guest. And as you heard in the intro, we met when I was in the process of buying my own home here. And so, Uli, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm really excited to learn about your path and a little bit more about what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
So, as I mentioned, you are a building inspector. You have done that for some time now. You're originally from Germany. Tell
That's
me
right.
a little bit about what your upbringing was like and kind of what parts of your childhood led to you being who you are now as an adult.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in East Germany, which, yeah, that was a very different life from what we know now.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was quite ill at the time. He had kidney failure and was
Mm.
on dialysis. And in East Germany, the survival rate was only about 5 years. And
Wow.
so my parents made the tough decision to file to leave the country and move to West Germany
Mm.
for medical reasons. And after quite a long ordeal of pushing and trying, we were able to leave and start over in West Germany when I was 15 years old. And little did we know that 1 year later in 1989, the wall came down and we would have a united Germany. But at
Right.
the time, obviously, that was, yeah, nobody would think this would ever happen, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
I had a very great childhood, loving parents. My mom and dad, my dad until he got ill, they were both physicians. And I have one brother who is 5 years older than me. And so the four of us basically left, and it was tough for my parents because they had to start over from zero
Mm-hmm.
while in their 40s. And
Mm.
but yeah, it all worked out, and they started a new life, and so did I. And yeah, it was interesting times.
When you look back at the way that you were raised and your relationship within your family and other role models that you may have had, you and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, how you transitioned into a more male-dominated field from a field that was more female-dominated.
Yeah.
But now, in your role as a building inspector, what do you when you look back at the way that you grew up, what do you think helped you with some of the challenges that you've had?
Um, that's a good question. I think I was in general always a very I I was always outside. I was always
Hmm.
trying to build something and be proactive in that regard. I was, riding my bike, and we lived right next to the forest, so we were building forts and things like that. So maybe that's where some of that has its roots. Um, and yeah, I just loved always being hands on, which is kind of surprising because my parents were not like that at all.
Hmm.
And my brother, though, he's very handy as well. So I don't know, maybe it jumped a generation.
Yeah. Well, that makes me smile when you tell me that story because I think back and even though I was in Los Angeles, we had almost an acre growing up and there were big eucalyptus trees. And I spent a lot of my childhood unsupervised
Right,
outside
right,
building forts, digging holes in the dirt, and creating booby traps so that hopefully my brother would fall in. And
right.
so I definitely got dirty as a kid, and I think that for jobs in which it's very hands-on, you work with your hands a lot. I think that having that in the childhood creates a little bit of an appreciation for just how things work and mechanics of
Right.
things. So
And
a lot of,
also, I think, yeah, independence as well.
yeah,
Because just like you said, my parents didn't know where I was all day. I mean, it was come home for dinner at 7, and that's about it. And
right.
we were left to our own devices, and we learned a lot growing up that way, right?
Right. And it's a contrast to how parenting has changed over the years. I think
Yes.
there's a tendency now where we're seeing helicopter parents and bulldozer parents, and I came across a term more recently which it really resonated with me, and I was like, "Oh, I kind of like this," and it's free range parenting, right? And I think that's probably how you and I grew up a little bit, some free
Right.
range parenting. We kind of
Yes.
ran around and we got cuts and scrapes and got dirty. And then as long as we
Right.
showed up for dinner,
That's
then
right.
everything was
Exactly.
good.
Yeah, a lot has changed, obviously, but I've always tried, and my husband and I, to raise our kids with that background and raising independent children who are in charge of their own making.
Right.
And so far, it's paid off.
That's good. And how old are your children now?
My oldest one is 23.
Hmm.
He is a biomechanical engineer and works here in Hillsborough at a local company. And then my second one is 21. He has one more year. He's currently a student in Ashland studying creative writing.
Hmm.
And then my daughter, she's 16. She is a junior in high school now, and she's actually doing the early college program, which we're very excited about.
That is very
Yeah.
exciting. So what brought you to the US?
That was actually pretty coincidental in a way. My husband's family, they had lived in the States for a while, for 10 years actually,
Hmm.
but had moved back before my husband was born. So he was born in Germany. And I have family in Canada, and we both always had the travel bug and wanted to live somewhere else abroad and had looked into Canada or the United States. And when he was studying biomechanical engineering in Germany, he had to do an internship as part of school, and there was a flyer at the university for a position in Portland.
Hmm.
And he applied. It was the only one he applied to. He got it, and it was supposed to be for a year. And
Oh,
20 years
wow.
later, we're dual citizens, and we love Portland.
Yeah.
So we've
Sounds
always been
wonderful.
in the Portland area.
And so and I alluded to this a little bit in my introduction, but when you and I met, you were dressed and getting ready to crawl under a house. You reported to me that you found a bunch of dead caterpillars. And I mean, I may do some gory things being a surgeon and with blood and broken bones, but you mentioned dead caterpillars, and I was like, "Whoa, I don't want to be crawling around the caterpillars." And we'll get into it a second. What is involved in being a home inspector? But I want to mention that being a building inspector is very male dominated. There really aren't that many women. I remember looking online and trying to research that, and there was actually in one of the associations it actually said even women can be building inspectors. It's a great job. And so there was actually active recruiting online in that on that website for women, which told me, there are not a lot of women in this field.
That's right. That's right.
So maybe for a two-part question. One, tell me a little bit about what it is you do as a building inspector and what's involved in the training. And then the second part of that is I would like to know how you transitioned into that job from nursing, which is very women dominated. So two-part question. I'll
That's
let you
right.
go with that.
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I've always been very hands-on, and so try to do build things myself, and have done remodeling work when my husband and I built our house, or not built it, bought it. It was a foreclosure situation, so it was in a horrendous it was a big project, let's put it that way.
Mhm.
We're talking torn out walls and things like that. And we completely gutted it, made it our own, and did all the work ourselves. So we've learned a lot doing that, and I really enjoyed it. And I remember when we bought the house 18 years ago, and we had an inspection done. We I From that moment on, I was intrigued
Mm.
to do something like that. I thought the whole process sounds very interesting, and I would love to do something like that in the future. And then it took a few years for me to get to that point. The kids were little, so it's hard to start doing something like that when you have three kids at home. And by the time they were older, I thought, okay, it's now or never, and I'm going to start through and do this as a career. In the meantime, we had also bought an investment property that we completely remodeled. And so I think that gave me a good basis of what's involved and how a house is put together, not
Mhm.
just the individual components, but how the whole house works as a whole system
Mhm.
in terms of ventilation and things like that. So, as a home inspector, essentially, I'm looking at all the different components of a home, the exterior, the roof, all those, look at the lifespan of those things and in what condition they're in. And then also inside the home, the electrical, the plumbing, the attic space. Oftentimes, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, we find a lot of mold in the attics just due
Mhm.
to the high moisture levels that we're seeing here. And then the appliances, testing the furnace and things like that, and reporting all that and writing to the client so they have a well-informed basis of what to expect with their home. And from that, they can start negotiating with the sellers on repairs. Or I've had clients who walked away just because they didn't want to take on the project. But as you also mentioned earlier, the crawl space is a huge part of the home, which can make or break the whole thing. And we see a lot of issues in crawl spaces, especially water intrusion, again due to all the moisture,
Mhm.
and also unfortunately rodent damage is pretty common too.
I think
And
there are gonna be some listeners who, like myself, get freaked out about the caterpillars, but there are definitely gonna be some people that go, "Rodents, okay, I
yeah,
don't know if I can deal with that."
yeah, it's not my favorite part of the inspection, that's for sure. But it's, again, it's a very important part of it. And
Absolutely.
when I go around the house and see the vents and there's open vents that are broken, that already I hold my breath and think, okay, what do I have to expect here?
Right, right. Now, in the process of deciding to go down that road and
hmm
training, did you ever encounter anyone, whether it was casual acquaintances or friends or anyone along the way who said, "Oh, well, why are you doing that? You know, women don't really do that."
I still get it that people are surprised when they hear that. It is a very male dominated field. I've had a couple times where I had clients walk in to the inspection while I was
Mhm.
working, and you could tell by their face that they were a little taken aback that I was a woman, and I
Uh-huh.
may have read too much into it, but got the impression it's like, oh, does she know what she's doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
I
I feel
certainly get that.
I feel like women sometimes have to really prove themselves when
Right,
there aren't that many other women. And so,
right.
I mean, maybe you've seen it on their expressions, but did you ever feel like you had to do more? Or was it just paying a close attention to the quality of your work and just knowing that you're putting solid work out there?
Yeah, I think both of it
Hmm.
probably. I think in some ways I had to prove myself in explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and
Hmm.
the back information of it to show people that I know what I'm talking about. and in report writing as well, trying to be as thorough as I can and making or explaining everything so
Mhm.
that it makes sense. But
Mhm.
I vividly remember one client who was taken aback when he found out that I was a woman.
And
Yeah.
what did you have to say or do in that
I
situation?
I really had to prove myself in explaining why I'm doing it, and he second guessed a lot of things that I was doing. Did you check
Mhm.
this? Why is this? And and I took my time explaining it to him, and I did earn his trust. And actually, the funny thing is, he ended up not purchasing that home, and then called me on the next home that he wanted to
He
buy
did
because
he
I guess he
definitely
was
earned
happy.
his trust, yeah.
Yes.
And I think women in male-dominated fields encounter that a lot, and my sense is that the women that thrive and do well are the ones that can navigate that part of it by being cool, calm, and collected,
Mhm.
and to not get angry in the moment. I think maybe
Right.
afterwards you go,
Yeah.
you go, "Oh," but I think when you're dealing with another individual who's questioning you, you just kind of you state your facts, you stay cool, and you show them that you know your stuff.
That's right. Exactly. I think that's a very good policy, and I think it served me well as well. Yeah, definitely.
So tell me a little bit about your career before building inspection. So there was a big transition there.
Yes. So I actually worked as a nurse in Germany in a rehab center, neurology. And when we moved to the United States, we had a certain type of visa where I wasn't allowed to work.
Mm,
And so my husband did his internship and then was able to continue working at the lab that he had done the internship with. And so it took a while. The whole process, basically, until we got the green card was, I think it was 5 years or seven
oh
years.
wow.
Yeah, so it's a long
Yeah.
process. And so by the time I had my green card and was able to work, too much time had passed, and I would have needed to go through the entire nursing school plus all the exams again. And at that point, I decided I didn't like it that much that I wanted to go back to it and I needed to do something else. And I was intrigued by just being my own boss and
Mhm.
working for myself. And I think that also played a role in it. And so I started researching on what it took to become a home inspector, and I
Mhm.
ended up, there are different roads of going about it. I ended up going to a school in California through one of the main associations that we have in the country. Did that, and then I was very fortunate to be part of our local OAHI Association, which is an umbrella of, or it's under the umbrella of ASHI, which is the American Society of Home Inspectors.
Mhm.
And so we had pre-COVID, now we do have Zoom meetings, but pre-COVID we would meet once a month. And that's how we would talk about, we had different um, topics every
Mhm.
time, and that's how we got our continuous education. So early on I started going to these meetings because they're very beneficial, and you meet other inspectors, and one in particular was he took me under his wings. He
Mhm.
was getting ready to retire, and so I did a lot of ride-alongs with him, and he taught me a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. And so that's how I kind of started out. And then at the time, Oregon had its own tests that you needed to do to become a home inspector. I also, at the time, decided to take the national home inspector test. Just, you never know what you need it for, and in the end it
Mhm.
did come in very handy. And but now the rules in Oregon changed, and the National Home Inspector exam is the exam that everybody has to take in order to become an inspector in Oregon. And then I also got my general contractor license to work as an independent contractor as well. So that's
So,
kind of the route I took.
so as you made this transition into being a small business owner,
Mhm.
what were some of the most surprising parts about that, and what do you think you learned along the way?
Um, I think, starting out when you build your business can be daunting. There are a lot of things to, you know, consider. Obviously, marketing to market your business and start getting some phone calls, which I am not good at marketing myself. I'm just not that person. And so that was a challenge. And then obviously organizing everything from insurances and all the legal things that you need to have ready to go. But I think the marketing challenge to get started was probably one of the more difficult things, even though I was very lucky and my business took off fairly quickly. And after about 6 months, I stopped advertising because I had so much business that I didn't need to anymore. And
It was word of mouth, and probably that guy
correct.
who doubted you probably told all of his friends about this great building inspector.
Yeah,
Now,
and I think also in a way, and going to our national conferences and talking to other women and the challenges they face, I think I'm very lucky to be in the Pacific Northwest. We have a very people have a very liberal opinion, and
mhm.
I think as a woman in a men's trade, it can be a lot more difficult in other parts of the country. But in general, I have to say people were very they welcomed me with open arms, and they all thought it was wonderful that I did that.
That's great. Now, along the way, you are taking on a new career path, you're starting your own business. Did you ever have any moments, and I don't know if you've heard of imposter syndrome, but did you ever have any moments where you kind of had to catch your breath and say, oh my gosh, what am I doing here?
I still have that to this day. And I think maybe it's a good thing to have that in a way. It keeps us humble.
Yeah.
And as long as we realize that we're always learning and everybody makes mistakes and we have to learn from them. And going to those conferences, for example, always reminds me how much information is out there and what we can learn.
Hmm.
And that's always a humbling experience. And
Certainly.
yeah,
Certainly. I think in any field, you when you stop learning, that's kind of the beginning of the end.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always like to ask my guests if they have one piece of advice for women who want to do what they do, what that piece of advice is.
That's a good question. I think just go for it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Go with your gut feeling and push through. And yeah, I don't think today women can do anything.
Yeah.
And I think it's been proven in many areas, no matter where we look, that women are just as good, if not sometimes even better, as men. I don't know if I can say that here.
You can say anything here.
But yeah, I think women can do anything and just go for it and power through and follow your gut
I
and your
love that.
heart.
That's really good advice. So, if people want to keep up with what you're doing online or find you, or maybe they want to hire you, how do they find you online?
Yeah, so the main thing is my website. It's www.summershomeinspections.com, and that's just one word, one long word, Summers Home Inspections. And I'm also on Instagram at Uli Sommers, even though I'm not super active there, but I do check in every once in a while. But yeah, or just email me at ulisommers@gmail.com, also just one word.
Awesome. And you can look in the show notes for the proper spelling of Summers, but Summers with an O.
That's right. That's right.
And Uli is
You.
Uli.
That's correct. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, Uli, it was so nice having you on today. Thank you so much for sharing a little piece of what your day-to-day life is like and your path. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. We're done.
Good. Thank you. It
Good.
was fun.
I hope that was fun.
Yes, absolutely. I enjoyed that.
Good. So this will be going in, I think it'll either be at the end of the second season or beginning of the third.
Okay.
I'm about to launch the second sometime in October. So it may be towards the end of this year, or it might be very beginning of
Okay.
2021. And I'll just keep you posted. I like to stay ahead of it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'll just let you know. And, and I don't know if you have contacts within your own organization in the state or even the nationwide one. I have found that different societies like to hear about when their members are in the press. And so either you or I could email them and just share that the episode is coming out. And I'm sure there'll be people
Yeah.
that'll appreciate it. So
That sounds great. Yeah, the ASHI